Good morning. It's good to see y'all today. I know some of you were here with us in the 9 o'clock service and you heard Lizzie preach. Some of you just got here and you're like, I came for this thing about immigration. This is the thing about immigration. This is Reverend Lizzie Wright. She is the director of Austin Region Justice for Our Neighbors, and they provide free legal services, advocacy, and education for immigrants and refugees in our community. And so I'm excited for all that Lizzie is going to share with us about the work of JFON and her ministry there, and all that they do for, justice in the world.
The things,
so,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you. It's good to be with you this morning. I am wanting to be sure that we get to some time where you can ask questions, and then I have to go, I don't know, that's a really good question, probably about a few of them. So I'm going to try to speak clearly, sort of slowly, but also get us through a good chunk of information to then get to that time where you could ask some more questions about stuff. So just for those who may not know about Justice for Our Neighbors in general, my kind of brief description is to clarify, we are a separate 501c3 from the United Methodist Church, but we started under the umbrella of the United Methodist Church. In fact, we started because of the work of UMCOR, or the United Methodist Committee on Relief. So you may be familiar that that's like the Methodist version of the Red Cross. We support UMCOR's administrative fees so that then when there is a disaster somewhere in the world, they can show up quickly and get to work right away, and then any money given to deal with that disaster goes to that disaster, right? And we've been doing that work since like the 40s. And in the process of tending to people after disasters when they're displaced, part of the work started to expand into realizing that folks need help navigating their rights when they're displaced from their home country for some time. And then in trying to sort that out with people, I like to say that folks started to realize in doing that work that the U.S. immigration system itself was a disaster that needed some work, right? And so a whole separate entity was created that at first was called Just Neighbors, and then in 1999, Justice for Our Neighbors was established as a network. Our network still exists. We have 19 chapters across the United States and Texas. We're here in the Austin region, and I'll say more about what that means to have region with the name. We have a chapter in the Houston area, in the DFW area, and in El Paso. You'll notice that then El Paso is the only one that's along the border, and that's partly because it is hard to be in nonprofit work and sustain it financially, and I am going to say more about money at some point, just fair warning. But I also was asked about it, so that's not just me. But also, it's a good reminder that the work of welcoming immigrants, of working for what I like to call more so than just welcoming, but immigration and immigrant justice, it's not something that is located only at the border. It's not stuck there. People are already integrated into our lives. We are already relying on neighbors, much less just called to love them, right? So let's see. Our chapter, and also the network now has a different name. Some of the chapters still have Justice for Our Neighbors, or JFON, for JFON as the name, but the network that once was established as Justice for Our Neighbors at a national level is now called Immigration Law and Justice Network, which is much clearer about what we do, right? Than when you say I work for Justice for Our Neighbors, people are kind of like, and that means? But it's not as kind of charming of a name in some ways too. I think a lot gets communicated through the word justice and neighbor, right? So we were established in 2013. It was a time when there was an extreme surge of unaccompanied minors, and we saw the effects of that in the Austin area. And so our service area for the legal services part of our work covers Travis County and its contiguous counties. One of the questions I was sent was, how do we kind of get some of the work in the Williamson County area? Oh, believe you me, we cover Bastrop, Blanco, Burnett, Caldwell, Hayes, and Williamson counties alongside Travis County. And as you can well imagine, most of our clients don't live in Travis County because they can't afford to, right? They can't find a spot that they can afford. It's not that some people live the high life and live in Travis County. I sometimes wonder how I afford to live in Travis County. But we cover Williamson County, and some of you may even remember from the earliest days of Austin Region JFON that we did clinics right here in Georgetown. We have been long supported by the Central Texas MFSA, or Methodist Federation for Social Action, and we did clinics at First Georgetown. Julie Fushak was a huge supporter, if you know her name from other Methodisty things that you've done, and we are very grateful for her leadership through the years. We stopped doing clinics. Clinic, in the context of legal work, is like an on-site, one day, people come and they kind of get triaged, and then you can kind of give them an acquaintance with their possible case status of things or possibilities to move forward. But you only agree most of the time to take on the casework for a certain percentage of those folks coming in. If you're doing it at a truly kind of make the announcement, and then people can come to receive services that day, get triaged, all that kind of stuff. 2016 seems like a long time ago in some ways, right? I came on board as the first executive director in 2019, so before that we just had legal staff, and at one point a part-time development director, but only for a limited time that a grant provided for. And by 2019, we had actually stopped doing clinic work because, as you can imagine, it became less safe to say, hey, you can come here to get immigration legal help. Come on this day to this place where we'll all be together for you to find and harass, right? Add to it that in 2017, we had already seen a huge shift in need in our area for more asylum work being done specifically, and I just kind of can't help but let everything be a web that goes together, so I'm just going to take a second here to say, let me clarify a little bit about asylum real quick. First of all, it's essentially been eroded completely, and that was true over the last 4 years as well. But affirmative asylum means you are in the United States with some kind of visa, might be a work visa, student visa, could be a travel visa even, and before your visa expires, you approach the government saying, I fear going back to my country. You've seen like a West Wing episode, a Law and Order, something, right? Where like somebody is here as a concert pianist or something, right? And then before there's like a Magnum PI episode about like, am I connecting? Somewhere in here I'm connecting with a TV show people watched or rewatched. Anyway, that's something that TV sometimes gets right. A lot of times TV does not get immigration right? Like there's a lot of like, we'll just get married. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, which is true from my own family's story. My brother-in-law is an immigrant from England, and so he had a lot of privilege along the way, and it was still really harrowing and really hard and really expensive. And he was just thinking about pursuing citizenship from being a green card holder, but because of the change of things and people being detained at their citizenship interviews, because of maybe some little glitch here or there from somewhere before, there's a lot of nervousness, and we're not sure he's going to move forward with that this year after all. Anyway, besides affirmative asylum, where you do that while you're here with some kind of visa status, defensive asylum means that the government has found out that you entered or overstayed you either entered without a visa or overstayed your visa, and they are putting you in removal proceedings or getting ready to deport you, but you're supposed to get a hearing for that. And if you express fear about returning to your home country, you can try to use asylum as your defense against removal. So in 2017, we almost exclusively went to removal defense, both for children and adults, and with adults, it was almost exclusively defensive asylum. These cases take a long time, they're very intensive, and it doesn't really make sense to make people go to a site to kind of talk it out. We had already identified folks who had that need, so we started to go to being appointment only. Where that kind of hurt us as an organization is it meant we couldn't build some of the same relationships we'd been building in the community with volunteers and congregations and things like that by being able to be physically present here. But believe you me, we have residents of Williamson County that we serve right now. And because everything is changing rapidly in how policy is being carried out, we are having to, the nice way I say it is like be as nimble and as flexible and as attuned and responsive to community needs as we can be. We're not taking new asylum cases because there aren't new asylum cases to take. Asylum is basically gone. We aren't doing TPS cases, temporary protected status, because the government is closing temporary protected status for category after category of people. So a lot of the humanitarian casework we had been focused on is getting shut down. It's like different cultural reference. If your kids or grandkids play Fortnite, it's this game where like the longer you're in the game, if you happen to survive, the play area gets smaller and smaller to just kind of keep making it harder to survive. You can't just hide out the whole time. It's gonna close the area that you even have available to you. And right now, the path forward for people, the path to safety, the legal route is getting narrower and narrower, or it just doesn't exist. It's being erased for people. It's, to me, like the scene that scared the life out of me as a child watching Alice in Wonderland, where the path is getting swept away in front of and behind her, and she's just in the dark. The other comparison I like to make about the way that policy works, because we haven't had comprehensive laws made about immigration since Reagan was in office. So that's basically my entire lifetime, Jessica's entire lifetime. We're no longer young, just so y'all know. We like to think we are. We just have good skin care routines, right? But in our lifetimes, there has been no comprehensive law made. And so what that means is that the way immigration law works in the US, it's done by Congress, right? It's in the hands of Congress to set laws. I liked government history. You'll hear some about that if you haven't heard the sermon already. So I remember the three branches of government, right? But whatever lines on the coloring book page of immigration law that Congress doesn't set in a particular way leaves the executive branch free to color in the picture. Does that make sense? And so that's why it can change real quickly. They can kind of, well, what if we just use a black marker, though, to make a line right here, and then color this in deep red? Well, let's make it a little bit lighter. Let's make it a little bit darker, right? Immigration policy can change like that. Law is taking forever. I mean, and I have personal thoughts on that, but that's when we have more time to talk sometime. And let's go get some coffee or a different kind of beverage if you want to talk about that. But I'm already like at the point where I need to be getting to the things where I can ask you what you want to know more about. But so right now, it's like the coloring book page is what we're being told is the way it is, and then the picture looks completely different each day, how it's actually being carried out. This makes it really hard as people who are trying to advocate for our neighbors to know their rights, for people who don't feel as at risk to be able to still hold people accountable to the rights folks are supposed to have. Makes it really difficult when we're told the picture is this, it's colored in this way, and then the people who made the picture aren't sticking to the picture, basically. So the way there's a lot of me presenting saying the way it's supposed to work, but then we've heard that this has happened, or we've experienced that this has happened. So most recently for us, we do have some affirmative asylum cases still, because we took them forever ago before we narrowed down to removal defense, and we're still representing those people. We had a client who had been waiting 10 years for his asylum interview. So this isn't court. This isn't a hearing. He's just meeting with an asylum officer, not a judge, an asylum officer who's supposed to hear this. He's already had to turn in a brief, all kinds of things. But he's going to to his interview to answer questions. And usually affirmative asylum interviews we feel pretty confident about, right? But we weren't sure what would happen at this one because of stories from other places. And lo and behold, our client, his name was called, walked into the room for the interview, and as soon as he crossed the threshold, they handcuffed him and took him to detention. And we had to wait, and we're watching the phone for when we could tell that it was a collect call coming in, so we could reconnect with him, find him, talk about what it would mean to try to bond him out if they're gonna allow people to be bonded out of detention. Y'all, this is the epitome of did everything the right way, which is what I'm gonna be preaching about if you haven't heard it yet. But when people say, why can't they do it the right way? He did everything the right way to be affirmative asylum. He's not on the government's radar for having been in trouble, but he's in detention. Now, his wife was there too, and we had been fretting about how, well, you know, a lot of times it's better for them to be able to go interview together, but for whatever reason, their cases weren't being called together. And it was like the weird thing of like, oh, well, actually, that's a big relief because they didn't ask who she was, and we were able to just walk out the door, and she didn't get detained too, right? So it's a whole new world for our work. It's really emotionally exhausting for our whole staff, for volunteers who are involved. Obviously, it's astronomically, exponentially worse for our clients, right? I mean, because we're all feeling worn down. What is going on, right? Like, and one of the comparisons I used to make that I know makes people uncomfortable because we don't want to go back there, but I like to say, remember when we were in lockdown for COVID? And how suddenly, whichever side you were on about masks and vaccines, everyone felt like the other side was betraying them somehow, right? That they had neighbors they never knew were like that, right? Whichever way you felt, you were shocked to learn you couldn't trust that neighbor was the way it felt, right? And you missed major family events. Couldn't be with family for funerals, weddings were canceled, or happened, but no one got to come, and the celebration wasn't the celebration you imagined forever. And for some of us, it was scary. Every time we left the house, we thought, is this the time I'm going to bring it back? Am I going to bring it back to my parents who have comorbidities? Am I going to give it to my children? Is this a time where going out will be the time I catch it? All of that is so parallel to the life of anxiety that our immigrant neighbors are living every day, being cut off from family for decades, unable to grieve your parents, your siblings when they die, unable to attend special events, unsure which neighbors you can trust with who you are, and unsure if today will be the day you don't come home safely where you are caught versus catching something. So like, that place we don't want to go because the anxiety of it and living it, even just thinking about it now, is so much. That is what people had been living with and still live with at a high level, and then go out and do their jobs and participate in our community and teach our kids and, you know, all the things. It's astounding to me, right, to think of that. So, okay, some of the other questions that came up that was like, I love y'all from the start. I don't even know you yet. There were questions like, so how do we help? And one of them even was like, tell us about your financial status. What financial needs do you have? How are you allocating your funding when everything is changing? These are not just nice questions, but smart questions too, right? So one thing I'll clarify, we did not have a bunch of government grants, so we didn't suffer directly from that, though other chapters did for sure. Some had just expanded their staff because of big grants to help support, mostly work with children that then completely got cut off. But it means that people who were trying to get that funding are now competing with us for the grants that we do try to get. We have a challenge already based off of the kind of work we do. I don't know if you do a lot of work with foundations, but especially private foundations are very into not wanting to fund salaries. When you provide legal services as your programming, the program is an attorney doing their job, so we have to pay their salary. Like, there's only so much copy paper we need and can buy. And a lot of times, foundations, you know, they moved to this because they wanted to be sure people were, like, using the money wisely, not just puffing people's salaries up, which, like, it's a little rare in the nonprofit world that people have puffed up salaries. But anyway, so it makes sense on one level, except it's one of those problems where, like, once you make it a rule, it starts to exclude people without you being able to think about, like, what are the other implications of that. So we really struggle to find foundations that are even open to the kind of work we can do. Add to it if there are political dynamics where places don't want to fund immigration legal services because of the word immigrant in it. It's tough. And so in the 6 years I've been working for JFON, we've been working really hard I mean, there's also stuff people who live in grants world can talk about, the overturn, having to pursue the next grant, having to let people, there's so much energy spent on having to create a new position, then you have to let that person go because the position can't be renewed, on and on. It's very complicated. So there's a way in which we don't dig in deeply there on purpose because it's already an uphill battle for us and it's just not the best return on investment for our time. Does that make sense? So that's why it's really important for us to have relationships with people and with congregations. And one of the things we've really been trying to build over the last 6 years, and we're really beginning to step into it in a kind of fully envisioned way, is what it means to be a partner congregation with our work. We want that to be a real thing, knowing that we're providing immigration legal services, sure, but remember that we also do education and advocacy. And I like to remind folks that's not just for immigrants. Like, that's not like ESL classes. We let churches handle things like that. We're going to handle education like this, where we're talking about the misinformation that is rampant. We have this 3 Myths kind of lunch and learn type program. We have a book. I brought some copies, but I wasn't going to push that hard. I can mail books to you is the thing. But we have a book where we had 12 people share their stories of being an immigrant, and we have study programs based off of that, some that are faithy and some that are not faithy, because I am also available. Mel Hazelwood was great to invite me to a community group, not just a church group, but to connect with other active community groups even that maybe aren't focused on faithy things. So I can do the faithy version, the not faithy version. But the truth in our stories, the whole point of saying the truth part is in part to say, we want to rehumanize this by having 12 stories shared, but we also then want to connect that to data to be this isn't just 12 anecdotes we happen to find of people sharing life as an immigrant. But here's the data about immigrants in our community that goes with that. So that's part 2 that I helped to write. It seemed a lot longer before it was put in print, right? I was It also, though, has Jesse Esparza is a professor at Texas Southern University, a history professor, and he does, just the intro itself is worth it. It's a beautiful summary of the history of immigration in the United States. So we have the truth in our stories, and we have programming for the truth in our stories, and 8 of the stories are on video as well, which is what we include in our programming. But here's the thing, the legal services is the thing that's always the most attractive to folks and they want to know the most about. And often in presentations like this, I'll inevitably get a legal question even where I'm I'm not an attorney and I can't answer that. And even if I could, things are complicated and I'm not sure I could right now anyway. But the legal services is pursuing justice for an individual and the people connected to them, which is not even just their family, right? But it creates generational change beyond the singular person, right? However, I like to say and remind us, it creates change for our community as well. When we are able to empower people, when we, the rising tide lifts all boats, right? Rather than pushing people down, when we empower them, it really does empower our whole community. And that's not even getting into the usefulness of immigrants, because I don't want to make an argument based off of you should know how much your life already relies on immigrants in the first place. I want to be able to make an argument, especially standing in a space like this with a cross behind me, that you should care because they're human, right? And you shouldn't just care because they're children. The 45-year-old men matter too. So, that's why the education and advocacy work, that is the long-term justice work. That is the creating justice in our community. That is immigrant, community-wide justice work. And it is desperately needed, and possibly because there hasn't been as big an emphasis on that, is partly how we're in the situation we're in, where not only is misinformation rampant, but people feel empowered to completely dehumanize and aggressively, physically harm our neighbors right now. So this kind of thing is important, and I'm grateful for this starting time, but I hope, and I have a feeling I know, this isn't gonna be the last time we're talking to each other as a community, right? And I will make the drive on I-35 even when it's not just a 40-minute drive on a Sunday morning, I'll tell you. I'm a Texan through and through, and I can listen to podcasts in the car. It's no big deal. I'll get myself up here, and we'll have coffee or another beverage and talk some more about what we're going to do together. So I do still want to take questions, but I have to get to, I know we're stopping in 8 minutes, I think, right? Okay. Well, I'm not going to take 8 more minutes, but I am going to say 3 major ways to connect right now. So we are about to have our annual fall event. It's our main event of the year. We don't do a lot of events-based fundraising because, again, it's a not great ROI. It's a lot of investment in time. But we do believe in celebrating. And in the midst of this kind of oppressive what is going on in the world feeling every day, it's really important for us to hold on to the celebration and the joy and the hope all the ways that we can, right? So we have what we call homecoming as our annual fall celebration. It's the work we do, right? We're working on homecoming all the time. And so September 28th, it's a Sunday. It's real far south, y'all. It's off of Brody Lane near Mopac and Ben White in South Austin. So it's real far south. So I know I'm making a stretch when I say you could come to that event. You could either buy individual tickets, or you could think about which group in the church or the church as a whole wants to buy a table of tickets and who to send. You could think creatively about, if it's not us because we don't want to drive, who do we know in Austin who needs to go? There are lots of ways we could talk about that. There are other ways to participate in homecoming. You could sponsor something and say, we don't need any of the tickets, but we want you to know this congregation supports this way, and we want you to put our name out there so others know and see we want to join in that, because that does matter. People care to see, like, more people are joining in this, right? Entities are joining in this. The church is standing up right now, right? Then we are really excited. The very next day after homecoming, right there at the end of September, we are welcoming a legal fellow through a public interest fellowship program at UT Law. We had someone approach us in the early spring who is a graduating law student saying, hey, there's this public interest fellowship I could get money for to come work for you. And we were like, I mean, they're not going to choose us. Like, are you sure you want to put us on your application? Because, like, we're tiny, we're immigrant services. And she was like, no, y'all are the place. I've done my research. I talked to the person at the UT immigration clinic even. Y'all are the place I want to put on my application. And they chose us, and her. She's great, by the way. Like, it's about her, but they had to choose us too. And the thing is, they're going to cover her salary, but we have to pay her benefits. We have to get all the things that you need to actually do your job as an attorney. She'll be waiting on her bar results for the first part of the time that she's with us, but she could become a real lawyer, and then we need to pay her bar fees. That's something we do as a courtesy as an organization. So we need some specific funding. If you're looking for, like, oh, okay, I mean, I get it. She talked about how y'all need funding, but, like, what's, like, the thing? That's a way to specifically support us, is to give toward the fellow. Her name is Meg, and I'm sure I'm going to be putting something on our website soon that's about specifically giving to that, but you could also just put UT Law student if you wanted to be sure it was designated that way. But, you know, we've got to get, like, a laptop, a desk, all the things, and pay health benefits and stuff like that. Then the third thing is not just about funding help, but could be what I referenced at some point, I swear I did, there may be more to do right here together soon. And that is that we did get partial funding because even the Texas Bar Foundation was like, we don't really like to support salaries. And it was like, y'all are the lawyers. Like, you know what law what? So we got partial funding for a grant we submitted to the Texas Bar Foundation, and then we got the district office in our area of the United Methodist Church to support the other half of it. But we think we're going to have to replicate this over and over and over again. This is for what we're calling family separation document preparation. And it's going to probably be clinic-like, but in that case, it's going to have to be very, very quiet and centered and thoughtful about who knows what's happening when. We'll pick locations, but possibly tell people it could be here or here, and then, like, the 2 days before, let them know where. We may have to pivot and make it something that's in office, which would then make it complicated to have volunteers helping all the more. But what this is, and this feels very strange, but this is a great picture of the pivoting we're having to do. The aggressive way that people are being picked up right now and taken to detention means that folks have no preparation for what will happen for their children and their property. And then if they get deported, it's all the more complicated when you're no longer in the country, right? So you have to have legally enforceable documents. You probably see the commercials even that are like, that doesn't count, when it's like someone that's like talking about their will. Same thing for, oh, okay, well, you'll get the car. You can have this, and we're going to have the kids go be with Tia Sarah. It's not legally enforceable unless you have the documents to enforce it. Now, there are lots of Know Your Rights and family preparedness clinics where they give you the list of the things you should be preparing, but there's no walking you through it, having it notarized, all the things, right? So that's what we want to do, is have some volunteer attorneys, volunteer interpreters, volunteers who are doing just the writing down of what the interpreter says. I'm a notary, our legal assistant's a notary. Maybe we'll scrounge up a couple more people who can do that work. And then the other thing is, folks need to have copies of this in multiple places. Who's going to Kinko's or Office Depot to copy all of their most sensitive documents, all their medical information, all the things, all their financial information that might be needed, and their status out on display somehow in the midst of it possibly too. So folks who can then help to do some copying and scanning of all the things once we have all the documentation pulled together. And then add to it that this just feels so weird, but thinking ahead for family separation, starting on passports for children so that families can be reunited. Because even if a family decides they'll join the deported family member in the other nation, those kids need passports to get that process started. So it is really weird because we've been in removal defense and felt like the last line of defense, we're not going to let people fall through the cracks for so long, to kind of be like, it's not giving up, but it feels so strange to be like, this is this overwhelming, crashing wave over us. We have got to get some life jackets onto people if that's the reality that we're facing, though, right? It's just very different from when we were in the wave machine pool together with some predictability, to now be like, how do we survive this and limit the trauma? So I did talk longer than I meant to on that part, but let's take some questions maybe real quick, yeah? Yes.
Hang on.
Oh, sorry.
So you mentioned that our immigration system is a disaster. Is there anyone preparing for a time, past this time, that is writing comprehensive immigration law, preparing for the future time? Just like, Project 2025, they had been working on that for a long time, and then when they got into power, they had it in play. I mean, they knew what they were going to do. Is there anybody that is trying to come up with solutions that politicians can actually run on?
So yes and no. Of course, I'm also not aware of every entity everywhere, but what I would say from experience with some of the big players, like even ACLU, things like that, right? A lot of times ACLU is doing responsive work, though. But when you talk about legislation, there are huge movements, say, for pieces of things, and then some comprehensive work toward kind of like the similar bill that went through with Reagan, some kind of pieces of amnesty for sections of immigrants. But then that gets challenged from within the immigrant advocacy community itself, because it feels like we're ranking who's better than who's worth us giving citizenship to over who's not. Some people have been waiting for 20 years, but they're not a young, bright college student. So that's one of the challenges even about how do we create a pathway forward for DACA recipients, which, by the way, if you didn't realize, DACA recipients don't have a pathway to citizenship, didn't have a pathway to citizenship, right? And then DACA got cut off for any new applications anyway, and now you can't even get a new work permit in the state of Texas. So there are people who are trying to open up pathways. Temporary protected status was another, where hey, if you were from the Sudan while that was war-torn for a decade, and so you didn't put your life on hold, you had children in the U.S. who are now U.S. citizens, there's no pathway forward to adjust status from TPS to citizen. So that's what I mean by sometimes there just isn't a path. When people are why can't they do it the right way? There isn't a way. There are people who, if you have a conviction from when you were a teenager for possession of marijuana, not distributing, just possession, there is no way to clear it off their record to be able to move forward in the immigration process. So there are people who are trying to work on pieces like that. They pull different portions together to offer it up. And basically, this is what John Cornyn has said. Sorry, I had to take a breath. It's bad. Comprehensive is bad because it gives everybody something to dislike in it, right? So we need to do it piecemeal. Okay, well then when we offer up piecemeal, this isn't going to get priority. We've got to talk about Social Security. We've got to talk about, so immigration kind of gets used as a tool, I think by both parties, by the way, too. To be able to have it always on hand to point toward is a convenient thing to not make progress in. What frustrates me is immigration is connected to every other issue you're thinking about, truly. It is hard to find an issue that immigration doesn't intersect with. And so if we worked on comprehensive immigration reform, it would affect a number of areas in a positive way. What I will also say, though, is some of the campaigns that maybe don't come to mind when you ask a question like that would be, there's not universal representation in immigration. So law and order, you've heard Miranda rights a million times. If you can't afford a lawyer, one will provide it for you. Not an immigration law. And by the way, immigration courts aren't run under the judicial branch. So there are movements to both move the court process for immigrants to be truly under our regularized court system, because right now it's under the executive branch, which is how they can hire an immigration judge and then say, oh, you're giving asylum to too many people. You're saying yes to too many people, so we're just going to remove you. You just get appointed by the AG. That's how you become an immigration judge. But there are also movements for things like universal representation. The idea that we should have something like public defenders and we could contract out. They did that some with unaccompanied children. That's what that money that got revoked was supposed to be about, was that at least we would invest in the idea that a child doesn't stand before an immigration judge with no one advocating for them. And then that money got taken away. So that's where there are some movements that are still really big concepts that have had a lot of thinking about it, crafting it, how do we fund it, how do we do all the things behind it. I just think immigration always gets moved back, even when you start to approach anyone who actually has, besides the people in the movement itself, trying to approach lawmakers, it's always treated it's not even the third rail. It's well, we don't have time for that. You're I think if you'd give it some time, you'd see. But yeah, sorry, I don't have a more hopeful thing to say. Yeah. They are, but they don't get anywhere when they do, basically. Most of the time, legislators say, I can't get behind this because I don't like that. But the last time it was done was under a Republican administration, that we granted amnesty and we held employers accountable. That was the whole point of that go-round, was we didn't just act like the problem is immigrants. We talked about problems in the system otherwise. So it's possible.
So ultimately, we need to change public opinion. Mm-hmm. Who is doing a good job of trying to move the needle on that, and how can we
be
part of it?
Who have you, no, and I'm not trying to just pass that off, but I live in my own bubble, right? And I think I know what I think is right. But who do you see out there helping to move the needle?
Not many.
Yeah? I mean, one of my friends reached out, said that he'd just seen Superman. I'm not as into superhero movies as anyone I've dated has ever wanted me to be, right? So I was oh, okay, is it any good? And he's it's great. And I was is it something I should see? He's you would love it. And I was oh, is it about immigrants? And he was I mean, kind of. And so, there's a big, then Superman got called super woke and all of that. I think there are people who are trying to give us stories as a place to connect. And I think that's a good tool. That's why I think we start with people's stories, right? I allude to this in my sermon. I think one of the methodologies, I don't know if anyone's doing it well, but I think as far as changing public opinion is, I think a lot of people don't know how connected their lives are to immigrants already, and not just in a utilitarian way, but in that sense of people who don't know they can trust them to say what their status is. So they don't actually know how many folks they care about count until the rubber hits the road. And then that person starts off as an exception. But I just think it's a parallel to the way my grandparents which they all grew up in the South, but especially like my Kentucky grandmother, you know, she would be like, oh, the Johnsons, they are the salt of the earth. They're colored, you know. And yet she could name exceptions to the overarching opinion, right? And then that, for many people, is the way toward shifting their opinion, is when you can finally talk about like, yeah, but if every immigrant you actually know is someone you think is the absolute salt of the earth, hardest work you've ever met, all the things, like, help me understand why immigrants are different when these are the immigrants you know, right? So I think trying to get it back to that personal place, that's one of my tactics at least, is to really push people to find the connection to the immigrant in their life. If they're telling me, but immigrants this, I keep being like, is that an experience you've had? You know, getting curious with them about it and not pushy, like, oh, well, that isn't, but is that an experience you had? Or is that, oh, well, I was actually wondering about the experience you've had with immigrants, and just continuing to push for that, because you wind up always getting these stories, oh yeah, no, I used to go to my friend's house and his mom made the best tamales, and, you know, like, or whatever it is, and you're like, right, then let's start there. But I think we need big platforms with big stories that are compelling, and then we need the persistence and consistency of all the rest of the time too, making sure that's happening over and over and over again with folks. That's my starting answer to that. But again, let's get a beverage.
All right, I'm in the tech booth. Hi.
Yeah.
Two things. One is I like James Tallarico, and
Yeah.
you might just Google him. Okay.
We're trying to get him to speak at homecoming, but we haven't gotten through there yet.
He's articulate, and he went on Joe Rogan recently. And the other thing, my question is, have you? It's kind of nerdy, but have you used AI, or do you have anybody who is good at AI that you maybe have thought about how AI could help the work you do?
So I should have said this. Right now, our team consists of our legal director and attorney, Rebecca Rosenberg, or Becky. She's been on staff for over 10 years. She's brilliant. She used to be a staff attorney, then moved into the legal director position, and we had to fire our second attorney for something, and we just didn't refill that position because COVID hit. We're working on getting a second attorney besides Meg, our fellow. Then we have a legal assistant to support Becky's work, and then there's me. So if it's not legal work, it's me. Unless there's a volunteer, you can take it on, and then I manage that person because it's me, right? So I have been trying to dig in some, and I actually just was doing a research interview where I was in it for 2 hours, where someone was like, tell me about processes you go through, and the whole point was that this was Google, which, good and bad, I guess, yeah. But Google, in this case, was particularly interested in how to help small to mid-size nonprofits leverage their time toward more strategic work, was kind of what we were talking about. And so it was very much centered on, how do we keep you when you're smaller and so you can't pay for the fancy integrated thing? How do we help you take this process that requires signing into 5 different things and crossing the information over and all of that? I personally use, I love words, but I often use AI to get me the starting point. Because I can read something and go, oh, I wouldn't say that though, right? In a way that the blank page just keeps me frozen sometimes. So, but if that is something that we could have a beverage and talk about how you think it could be better, I would love to have that conversation too.
I would guess there's probably a couple dozen more questions in here, but we are out of time.
What we can do, and what I didn't do, I didn't specifically say I was passing around a clipboard that hasn't been going around for one thing.
Oops. We can pass it around in the next few minutes.
But the other thing you can do, write a question on the back of it. And one of the things I want to be doing is making sure that the questions you have are the kind of things we're sending out in our, not newsletter, but just regular emails. So this is how you can get connected with us. There's a QR code you can scan if you don't want to take the time to write out all the things. My business card, and then also some stickers and buttons are on the welcome table on your way out. So grab that. One side has JFON's information on it. The back side has my picture and my information, and that's a cell phone that can take text even. But if you put a question there, then hopefully there's going to be a box in an email that says, we got this question recently, and here's what we can say about it. But maybe we can squeeze in one more quick thing. I 100% can after 11 o'clock worship, yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the only thing
It
is where
starts
we
real
got to get
soon.
started.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's partly the thing is, but I have nowhere to be afterwards. My dog got to go to the bathroom and she's fine for a while. So yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Lizzie.
Thank you.